everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of the Boerne Brew here on Boerne Radio, 103.9 FM and 1500 AM. And you can also listen on the Boerne Star and Boerne Radio websites. Joining us on this week's Boerne Brew is the man that Boerne ISD Athletic Director Stan Leach called Mr. Boerne. His name is John Uecker, and he's been in Boerne a long time, and we're going to talk to him about his time here in Boerne and his role as an assistant football and baseball coach at Boerne Champion and before that at Boerne High. So, Coach Uecker, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I know you graduated from Boerne High School. What year was that?
1988.
88, okay. And I know your dad graduated from Boerne, and I believe he was class in 1950. Is that right?
Yeah, it was early 50s.
Yeah. You've had two children graduate from Boerne ISD, and I think you still have another that's still in the system.
I have a sophomore right now.
Okay. So your dad, you, and some of your children have graduated. So 3 generations. How far back does the lineage go to Boerne, the ties go?
Oh, way back. Dad was born here in Boerne, so his family's from the area. We've been here a long time.
Where did your grandparents go to school? Do you remember high school?
Grandma was from the Bulverde area, and Grandpa was from here. I'm not sure if they even had high school diplomas.
Yeah.
I don't think either one of them did. I know my grandma worked in the school district for years as a cafeteria, as a cook, and she was very famous for her great cooking.
Okay,
and
wow.
That was when everything was homemade in the cafeteria. And one of my first years, Sherry Otter, I was teaching with her, and she remembered the day I was born because my grandma was telling her about it in the cafeteria as she was getting fed food from my grandma.
So I know your dad, I know he played sports. And where did they play football and baseball at the time in the early 50s?
They played it where Birdie Middle School North is now.
Okay, they did. What
Yes.
about baseball? Did they play at the old field?
No,
there?
they played at Bauer Field. I
Yeah.
believe that was where everything was.
Right down the road.
My dad actually planted those pecan trees out there.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
In front of where North is. He was part of that.
That is John Uecker joining us here on the Boerne Brew. I'm the host of today's show. My name's Kerry Barboza. So you graduated 88. So when you were in high school, the home plate was where the outfield is, right? Where that brick wall is in the outfield, that's where home plate was, right? When you were in high school?
When I was a senior, they turned it around.
Okay.
So I think it was my senior year, they flipped it around. But up till then, it was facing the opposite direction. Home plate was more out close to the street, and the berm in right field was the left field line, the fence line was there where that berm was to keep water from running onto the field.
Was it a big adjustment switching fields or not really?
It wasn't that big of an adjustment.
Yeah.
Wind was always blowing out when it was faced the other way, or most of the time it was blowing out, and it was a short field, but I was a weak little guy, so it didn't affect me very much.
And I know you have a twin sister, Joan, and I know she was a coach as well. And I remember looking in the Boerne Star one time, and I saw your birth announcement. We used to run those type of things in the Star, and it was a birth announcement where you guys were born. I'm going to see if I can find that for you and look it up and see if I make a copy for you.
We were teeny babies.
And she, I believe, was Boerne's first softball coach. Didn't she start the program?
Yes, she started the program in 1993.
Is that what it was? In 93?
Well, fall of 93, so spring of 94. That was our first year teaching.
Yeah, and right there where they built, was that softball field built then, or did it come later?
No, they built it. They played first game on it.
Okay.
And it was where it was. And she was teaching at the high school then, and I was teaching at the middle school. It's amazing I was just married. I was getting a coaching stipend for basketball and track, and I was volunteering for baseball, football, and I was coaching 4 sports, but I was volunteering just to get a foot in the door. By the next year, I had a stipend for 4 sports.
Wow. I know Johnny Moldenheimer, he used to be the athletic director before Stan. He told me that where the outfield is on the softball field, that used to be a pond, that it would really collect a lot of water, and you could get tadpoles and little fish. It wasn't big bass or anything like that, but you could fish there. It was like a fishing hole, and then So that's why both those fields really, if it rains, they're in trouble. They don't dry real quick, and because that was a swamp area with the drainage thing right there. But so I know at one point UTSA, they're starting their baseball program from scratch, and they used Boerne Field for a couple years, I believe. Were you around when that was going on, or had you already left?
I was actually at college when that was happening.
Okay.
So I never saw UTSA. UTSA hadn't started their program yet when I went to college. That'd have been fun to play there. But then I think while I was in college, probably middle of my college, my senior year of college, they were based here in Boerne.
Yeah, for a couple of years at least. And I know Terry Galt, he was at UTSA at the time, and he remembers driving up. They would put all their supplies in a van or something, and he'd drive it up every day.
Yep.
So then after high school, where'd you go to college?
I went to Schreiner College.
Okay.
Didn't go far.
Yeah, so you're a Boerne guy. I mean, you've been in Boerne, you played here. You
Grew up, went all my school years here.
Yeah.
So I'm a lifer.
Yeah, you are. That's why Stan Leach calls you Mr. Boerne. And then you come back to Boerne after you graduate. Was this your first job?
This was my first job.
So first and only job, really.
First and only.
Yeah.
This is year 32.
Wow.
Like I said, I started out, that particular year was like last year, Boerne ISD was on an 8-period schedule, my first year. And then the next year we went to the block scheduling that we're in now.
And so as far as changes, I'm sure growing up in Boerne, you've seen a lot of changes. Besides growth, that's obviously the biggest change. What are some of the changes that you've seen in Boerne?
Types of people. And I think it's the whole world, the internet, the phone generation, the easy ability of pushing buttons. Sometimes that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
People say things that they need to think better of. And sometimes it's easy to push a button and push send to say something that, offends people. And I'm old school, and I believe word of mouth. I'd rather speak to somebody. But that's a lesson to all of us to learn, and it's easy for kiddos today to push buttons, and even parents to push buttons and email. That's the biggest change in teaching, and for us as teachers too, because it's easy for us to push that button and say something we shouldn't.
Yeah, I know when you do send that or post something, it's pretty much on there forever. You can delete it, but there's still the footprint of it somewhere. So, yeah, that's a good lesson as far as that part of it. But 32 years coaching here. Did you ever think about leaving and maybe I'll go work at Northside, anything like that? Did you ever think about leaving? You ever tempted?
Nothing's scared me to that point.
Yeah.
And that was one thing. I applied for the Boerne High head baseball coach in 2003. Didn't get it. It was a blessing. Even in 2003, how much the job changed in a few years as far as what the expectations of a head coach. Not that I think I could handle the X's and O's. It's the politics, the fundraising. I'm not a salesman in that aspect of the game. I know the game. I know baseball. But that was a blessing in disguise. Working with I've had very special coaches to work with at BHS, at Champion, starting with Ralph Halderman at Boerne, and then Bill Miller.
Bill Miller, I remember Bill.
And then Chuck
Foster. Yeah, he's the one that got it when it opened after Bill left in 2003. Chuck's the one that got it.
Yes, and then we have Ben now.
Yeah.
And Chuck is a blessing to work with every day. He's an incredible coach like Chuck as well.
That is John Uecker joining us here on the Boerne Brew, longtime Boerne resident, been here his whole life, left to go to Kerrville up the road to school, and he's come back and been in the district ever since then, born and raised here. When did you do, because right now you're football, baseball assistant, when did you start doing those two sports?
My first year, I actually volunteered baseball at the high school. So I'd finish track practice, and I'd go throw BP for Ralph and up at the high school. And we made a long playoff run that year, and then the next year we went to the regional finals and played Cal Island in the regional finals. That was 95.
Yeah, 95, yep.
And so I've been coaching baseball since I got here. But as far as a stipend went, I didn't get one the first year. Second year, then they gave me a stipend for assistant baseball at the high school.
And then when did you become assistant as well? Football.
Oh, see, I was teaching and coaching at the middle school. Gosh, I guess 2000, a little before 2000, I was actually getting a football stipend at the high school, because for a while there we were busing freshmen to the high school, and I was coaching football at the high school. But I was coaching basketball at the middle school still. So I would, and teaching at the middle school. It wasn't until the second year Boerne Champion opened up that I was actually on the campus at the high school. I did not teach on BHS campus, although I coached football and baseball there. I never taught classes at BHS.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the talent that's come through that baseball program, because there's been some serious talent come through, and they were there before I started working at the Star. But Logan Kensing, Seth Johnston. Logan played in the major leagues for about 8 years, I don't know, something like that. And then Seth played at Texas, was an All-American, won 2 or 3 national championships there with the Longhorns. But there were other guys before that, right, that were really good, that played D1 and elevated that program.
Yes, I think about Seth's older brother, Johnny Johnston, was on that 95 team. Chad Bukacek was on that 95 team. Ronnie McGinnis, they were on that 95 team, which was a great team. I look back, and that's one of the things, the depth. We had good teams, but the depth is so much different. And you think about it, there was a 4A team at that time, which was equivalent to 5A. The depth. And then you go into Logan and Seth. There was a lot of talent in that district, because Smithson Valley was in that district. Tybee was in that district. We won that district that year that they were seniors, and then we ended up losing to Tybee in the regional semifinals. And Smithson Valley and Tybee played each other in the regional finals to go to state, and we were all in the same district. Yeah. That was as deep of a district as I'll look at this year's.
Yeah, I was going to say that probably compares to this year. There's some really good teams in your district, but yeah, all that talent, you mentioned all those guys, and Seth and Logan, and I've met them and interviewed them, and I know they're in the Hall of Honor, and Pekacek's in it as well. But all those guys, they could never get to state. And then 2004, and speaking of great players, Russell Moldenhauer, I just mentioned Johnny. Johnny was Russell's dad. And Russell had a brother that was pretty good.
Greg.
Yeah.
Greg was with Logan and Seth.
So Russell had a brother, and then Bradley Suttle, and those two guys are on the same team, and they come along, and then 2004, that's the year that you guys win the state championship. What stands out, looking back, because it's been over 20 years now, what stands out to you about that state championship team?
Oh, we had 2 horses, Russell and Brad, but the role players.
Yeah.
The role players, that's what won a state championship. It was our 9-hole getting 2 hits in state semis and finals combined. It was our leadoff hitter getting 2 hits. It was those role players that didn't have high averages that they got on base. Brad and Russell got, I think each one of them got a hit in each game. But it was those role players that people stepped up at different times, and that's what won us a state championship. And you know what? There's a little luck. People ask me, was that the most talented team that you coached? Honestly, no.
Yeah.
You got to have a little luck. Got to have the right bounces. The next year we were better than we were the year we won a state championship.
Lost to Cal Allen.
Lost to Cal Allen in the regional finals.
Yeah, had some injuries, though. Yeah. I know Brad's shoulder was bothering him a little bit. But, yeah, definitely. It all has to fall together, right? Just everything. And that was the perfect season for you guys. But as far as the 2004 season, I think the thing that stands out to me is, of course, you mentioned Cal Allen a couple times. They were the big kids on the block at that time. They'd won state a few times at that point. You guys were the guys trying to break through that were good enough to beat them, but just had a hard time beating them. But that 2004 season, I remember you played them in the regional finals, so the winner got to go to the state tournament. You take game 1 at Wolf Stadium, and that's Suttle steals home. So he was at third base, and he talked about it where he said that the pitcher just kind of had a slow wind up, and he told Coach Foster, he said, I think I can steal home on this guy. And he did. And Russell Hawkins was there. I was there. I was doing the game with Bobby Stotzenberger on the radio, and we all have pictures of it. And that was just a great memory. But so you take game one there. Friday it goes, I believe, in Robstown. Didn't it go to Robstown on Saturday? So you drop game two. So it goes to a game three. And Suttle and Moldenhauer had pitched your 1 and 2. And so they're spent. They're done as far as pitching. So you have to go to Austin Jones.
Austin Jones, crafty lefty.
Yeah. And I remember that first inning of game 3. It was already nighttime in Robstown. It's basically Corpus area. And Austin's pitching. And Cal Allen had Jordan Chambliss, the kid going to A&M. He was a big football guy and a baseball guy. And he looked like a D1 athlete. He was a big kid, 6'2", 215 or whatever he was. And I remember Austin gave up a home run to Jordan that was probably the longest home run I've seen. That thing cleared at the lights of the stadium, and it was still climbing as it left the field. And that thing had to go 500 feet at least. I think it's probably still rolling around the Robstown area somewhere. But then Austin was just a great jump ball. He was off speed. He threw a lot of breaking pitches, and that just really frustrated the heck out of Cal Allen, and that was really all he gave up. He just settled in, and they couldn't hit him.
Yes. Sometimes good hitting teams have trouble hitting below average speed, and Austin had a great changeup, and he kept them off balance. His breaking balls and his fastball, he located. He did a great job pitching. Yep, he gave one up, but I believe we scored 14 runs too.
Yeah.
So it was I believe we ended up run rolling them to go to the state tournament.
Yeah, and you mentioned, so they get to state, you win the state semis, and then you win the championship game. And you mentioned the role players. I hate to even start mentioning them, but I think of Taylor Spala, Ray Martinez, Kevin Rawls, Conrad Serp were some of the guys. And you mentioned the roles that they played. And you had your superstars, but every two guys can't win it, right? They need the other guys to carry them, and I felt that's what you got that year.
Yes, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, good bounces, bad hops, whatever. You look at the steal of home, something that was bypassed there. They had an all-state catcher.
Yeah.
That dropped the ball right there. It would have been a really close play at home plate if he catches the ball. We win that game, and we go on to, obviously it was tied 1-1 at that point, but if we don't win the game or we win it in extra innings, you never know. That's the bounces of baseball.
Yeah, what was funny about that is I believe Conrad was batting. Y'all had 2 outs, and Coach Foster gave the sign for Suttle to steal, and Conrad thought he was saying bunt.
He was supposed to take.
And he tried to bunt, and by doing that, he got in the way of the catcher because he's got the bat down over the plate like that, and I don't know if he shielded the catcher for a second or two, and he didn't see Bradley heading home. But, yeah, he shields him, and then Bradley slides in, like you said, I think because the catcher saw Bradley coming in, I think just the reaction of it is what made him drop the ball. But, yeah, then Conrad said, I thought it was a bunt. And then Coach Foster asked him, why would I have you bunt with 2 outs? You couldn't have because Conrad was a big boy, and he couldn't have made it down the field. Yeah, that was just one of those breaks, like you said. But, yeah, I remember that night when you guys won it. That was a great memory covering you guys and winning the state championship. And there were a lot of tears from a lot of different guys. What was the emotion for you being in Boerne your whole life? What was the emotion like for you that night?
I was very pleased, very proud to be from Boerne and being here. I know something that at that point, as we have 2 schools here, that was right at the time that the bond had been passed,
right? That
we were going to have 2 schools. And that was one thing that Chuck and I looked up there at the stand and said, hey, is this ever going to happen again? Because there was going to be 2 schools. Talking about 2 schools working at Champion has been something that I tell my students every day. Sam Champion I played for. His first year here in Boerne was my 7th grade year. He was my football coach, my basketball coach, my track coach. And then when we went to the high school, he was vice principal and then principal by the time I was at Champion. I was graduating. And then when I got the chance to work at Samuel B. Champion High School, that's a great example to follow. He's somebody that gave me the motivation to do what I do.
John Uecker joining us here on the Boerne Brew. I'm the host of today's show. My name's Kerry Barboza. So Growing up, did you ever think that Boerne would be a 2 high school town as far as public schools? Did that ever cross your mind growing up?
Oh, honestly, I would hoped it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Really, to me, it divides the community to a certain
To a degree.
To a degree. I wish Boerne and Champion were this year in the same district for the first time. I was hoping one be Division I and one be Division II, and we both be there in Round Rock.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So you mentioned that this is the first time you guys have played. You guys coexisted for 16 years, never played in baseball and a lot of sports. You haven't played in football, hadn't played in basketball, hadn't played in volleyball. There was a lot of sports you hadn't played in. Softball, there some that you had and some you hadn't. So I remember the first game Boerne hosted there. Champion goes to Boerne High, and you go there and you're in the visitors dugout probably for the first time in your coaching career.
Yep,
This is the field where you won a state title and you coached and you graduated from. So what was that like for you, being in the visitors dugout there?
It was very strange running across to the other side, up in front of the first base dugout. It was weird making that walk across there. Good memories, lots of good memories, good times, a lot of good baseball that I got to see and play, but it was nothing but positives.
So you mentioned 32 years. How much longer you see yourself going, or are you just not sure at this point?
I see myself going. Willa, my daughter, is a sophomore, at least 2 more years. That's what my wife's telling me anyway. So as long as I can make it, I'm in pretty good health, and I'm enjoying what I do. We'll play it by ear when a couple years comes down the road.
So did you ever, I know you applied for the baseball job, but did you ever think about leaving Boerne and just maybe going to North Side or San Antonio and coaching?
Honestly, no. I haven't seriously thought about it. I love this place. My heart's in it. I have a great place, great house, home. This is my home.
And you mentioned Sam Champion. I got to know Sam a little bit as well, and just what a great guy. And I thought what a great legacy that they named the high school after him. And you have a lot of memories. You knew him growing up, and you played for him. And what stood out to you about Sam?
Oh, his energy, his enthusiasm, his excitement about kids, his love for the kids.
Yeah, he really loved the kids.
Yes.
He really did.
And you talk about relationships. Coach Leach talks about relationships with kiddos.
Yeah.
He had relationships, that long-lasting relationships with some people that they didn't like, but he loved them, and he showed them that love and gave them a chance, and they're successful as a result of the chance that he gave them in whatever it was, whether it was sports, whether it was later in his career when he was principal and leader of school.
Yeah, definitely a good man. We're about to wrap up, John, but I always ask a coach this last question for you. Every coach has superstitions of what they eat, how they dress, the way they dress. Do you have it? Some coaches have it, some don't. Do you have anything coaching superstitions?
Oh, a lot of times I'll wear the same shirt that worked on Tuesday. I'm going to wear that same, it's clean, but it's
right.
But I'll wear the same shirt. Now with Coach Woodchick, we don't wear a uniform top, but I know with Coach Foster and other ones where we wore the uniforms, it was the undershirt under the. But that's baseball, man.
a lot of
got something that you're thinking about, whether it's superstitious or not.
Yeah, I think of all the sports, I think baseball is probably the most superstitious. But
I agree.
But it works out. Anyway, that is John Uecker joining us here on the Boerne Brew. And John, thank you for coming out on the show and sharing your experiences being a longtime Boerne guy and all the memories you have of growing up in the district and playing and the players and the coaches. Just thank you for sharing all that with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, John, and we'll talk to you next time out there. Thank you for tuning in to the Boerne Brew.